This is the College Football Enquirer with Ross Dellenger and Steven Godfrey. I am Andy Staples. It is Notre Dame versus the world. And Notre Dame versus ESPN, Notre Dame versus the ACC, Notre Dame versus practically everyone. And guys, I got to say, I thought you'd get a backlash for Notre Dame. I did not think it would be as intense as it's been. I didn't think they'd skip the bowl game. I didn't think they would go after the ACC. Pete Bevacqua, the athletic director, who you two talked to on Sunday, Ross, very pointed comments on the Dan Patrick Show on Monday about the relationship with the ACC. And I'm genuinely curious where the Fighting Irish go from here, because he said there was, severe damage to the relationship with the ACC. So what does that even mean?
Yeah, permanent damage. It seems to me that means that in the near future, we could see some kind of changes with the relationship between or the deal between the ACC and Notre Dame. There's been behind the scenes, I think, the last year or two, there's been a little, strife, I guess maybe is the right word to describe the ACC and Notre Dame. It begins with their schedule. The Notre Dame has sort of pleaded with the ACC to have a stronger schedule and play the bigger brands more, like Clemson and Florida State and Miami. And that's sort of been pushed back a little bit by the league, and not necessarily the league office, right? I'm just talking about the members of the league. You don't have to vote for things like that. And there's been a lot of pushback there. I think Notre Dame feels like it sort of carries the weight carries the weight of the ACC a little bit, and it doesn't get enough back in return. Like there's these feelings that have gone back and forth for the last few years, and this is just sort of like the latest. I don't know if it's the straw that's going to break the camel's back, but it's just sort of the latest issue between the two.
Gentlemen, I went on probably a friend podcast of ours, right? Golick and Golick, two Notre Dame football players, alumni yesterday. I might have got a little carried away. I brought props, but it was seated on our conversation here on Selection Sunday.
Hold on.
What are your props?
You bring props on somebody else's show, but not on ours? Oh, okay.
I knew you'd be proud.
For those listening, Godfrey is holding up a copy of The Club, which is the excellent book about the formation of the Premier League, which, if you have read The Club, then it sounds an awful lot like college football right now. So the Premier League, British English soccer in the late 80s, early 90s, very similar to college football now. And that book by Jonathan Clegg and Joshua Robinson, very instructive. So I'm glad you brought that.
I brought that. It was the last. You guys have all had that where you've been recording all day, you've been doing stuff. Your last hit of the day, maybe didn't adjust the caffeine accordingly. Went on there and just went full gospel, okay, and just said, "Hey, you got nothing to do because you're not going to a bowl," which I'm fine with. We'll get to in a second. Why not pick up this book, Irish fans, and realize the power that you ultimately wield over the sport? And Andy, I think you and I were talking in the segment on Sunday about how far would Notre Dame take its outrage over this omission. And we sort of hinted or joked at the idea that this could incite a reordering of the very top end of college football. So I took it to its extreme. I didn't even worry about the ACC. We made fun of the ACC, but
I didn't write that column. Yeah, because I don't know that Notre Dame wants to be the one that breaks the seal on the Super League. Although I was thinking about this, because Ross took us through the Big Ten saga with Michigan and USC and that private equity deal so thoroughly. And I thought, if the Big Ten hadn't backed off, if they had pushed that deal on Michigan and USC, and Michigan and USC said, no, we're not doing it, then you could have had a situation where Michigan, USC, and Notre Dame all got together and started founding the Super League, which, if you know your college football history, the idea of Michigan and Notre Dame founding a league together would be unbelievable. But I wrote a column yesterday at On3 basically saying, hey, if Notre Dame's mad enough, then it needs to call the SEC and the Big Ten and say, hey, we want to do the same arrangement we have in the ACC. You guys want to do it? And They don't necessarily have to take Notre Dame's other sports because I think Notre Dame could park those in the Big East or the American pretty easily. But I do wonder if in this heavily pitched battle for supremacy between the SEC and the Big Ten, would one of them bite to keep the other from getting it?
Definitely. And I think that's a half step towards the concept of a super league, more or less. Now, what we're talking about is a little bit more extreme. And if you do a sort of one-to-one comparison to what ultimately happened in English soccer, you would need an actual separation, almost a dissolution of the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, et cetera. But who are we kidding, Andy? If Notre Dame struck some sort of scheduling agreement with the two nine conference game season leagues that are at the top of the sport, we're pretty close, right? We're pretty close. I think after Ross, you may have reported this after our show on Sunday. There's the amendment that kicks in next year, provided the size of the playoff does not exceed 14 teams, that Notre Dame is an auto bid in if they are ranked, is it 12th or higher, Ross? Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's correct. Basically, the MOU that all the leagues signed a year and a half ago, as part of that MOU is that Notre Dame gets a guaranteed berth into the playoff if it is ranked in the top 12 starting next year. So if this scenario that happened this year would happen next year, then Miami would have got bumped because Notre Dame's 11. So Miami would have got bumped. Not only that, guys, if Notre Dame was even a spot past that, right? If they were number 12, they would have bumped Miami. So you can think about the issues that's caused. I've previously reported that, but I don't think it's really sunk into people until the scenario actually happened.
Clearly, the ACC, SEC, Big 12, they agreed to that. The Big Ten, they all agreed to that.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, it's not just the ACC because they would have bumped Miami this year. Not just the ACC though, because I'm sure the other leagues are going, "Hey, that could be one of our teams getting bumped."
Exactly,
that's right.
But they agreed to it.
They had all agreed to it, and something to. It's been a topic here. I mean, this is a 3-day event. We're through for the day one, and everybody's come up to me. They talked about one of two things: Notre Dame or Lane Kiffin. Right? I mean, it's just that's all everybody wants to talk about. So I'm sure the next couple of days there'll be more talk about Notre Dame and the playoff and the CFP. And a couple of things to note: that MOU is only enforceable if the playoff is 12 or 14 teams. And right now, if it goes above 14, the MOU doesn't cover anything beyond 14, which means the MOU, in a way, gets shredded up and you start over, you renegotiate.
Is it really
things.
necessary if it goes to 16? I mean, so Pete Bevacqua said on Monday that he thinks it's going to 16. So that would probably render that MOU, that was a memorandum of understanding. I know this audience knows that, just in case. But that would render it null and void. And let's be perfectly honest here. If you're not in the top 12 or so, or in this case, if they go to 16, they keep the auto bids the same. If you're not in the top 14 or 15, you don't really have a claim on competing for the national title. So it's okay. I don't think you even need to fight for that. But my question is what does Notre Dame do? Because I've seen some Notre Dame fans say, hey, let's dissolve the relationship with the ACC, park our other sports in the Big East like we used to, and then just be a true independent. I don't think that's feasible in the era of the 16, 17, and 18 team mega conference, because you would never, ever play a power conference school in October or November. Your scheduling would be a nightmare. You need one of these arrangements. The question is, do you need it with the ACC?
No, I ran this by the Golics, actually. It was a pretty good test case to have two former Notre Dame players and people who are very tied in South Bend. There's an acknowledgement there that you cannot operate wholly independent now that everyone is pushing for 9-game conference. I keep stumbling over this. 9-game conference slates inside mega conferences. They know. I did a story a couple years ago about how BYU and Army really struggled in November. And those are national brands, for very different
reasons.
We
play UConn twice in November? Is that possible?
Well, I mean, you saw a lot of Utah State. You saw a lot of Monmouth, and that had a negative effect in a lot of different ways. BYU was jockeying for the best bowl it could at the time. Army's trying to get bowl eligible at the time, but they needed X amount of FBS wins. this trickles up, I guess, to Notre Dame because it's not about, oh, someone's ducking the Irish, someone doesn't like the Irish, there's a conspiracy against the Irish. Guys, the dance card is just full across the Power Four.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you can do about this. And again, I found it, most Irish I've talked to have acknowledged two things. The most important games for the next couple of years will be played in September, which is what happened this year. And you cannot guard against a team in transition. Like Marcus Freeman didn't do anything wrong because he had turnover at the quarterback position or at various other positions on the field. The problem is Notre Dame wants to play Miami probably in November. They want to play Texas A&M probably in October. I'm sure they would love to ramp up and play some of those other easier teams that they played this year in September, but they cannot, and that's a huge problem. Also, they had a bad schedule this year outside of those 2 wins, guys. Multiple, 3, like a lot.
All the leagues going to 9 games. I mean, this just, as you mentioned, it just sort of cuts down the opportunities for Notre Dame. There's a lot of people that have been taken aback by Bevacqua's comments and how strong they are. Certainly, many people in the ACC, and it sort of reminds me. It's just growing the animosity toward Notre Dame. It's always been there, that they're different and they're independent and they get treated different. And boy, you can feel that from after.
It's like Fielding Yost has been represented, except for it's not anti-Catholic sentiment anymore. It's anti-independent sentiment.
Yeah, but I tell you what, man, the roots are still there because in our part of the country and where we're from, like I was born and raised Protestant. I'm Catholic now. It's a real thing. I'm not saying there's an anti-Catholic sentiment carrying the tone. This is about college football. But the SEC, who doesn't really have a dog in this fight, right? Notre Dame did not knock anyone from the SEC out, nor were they really knocked out by anyone from the SEC. I guess you could argue Bama. But there's a real dislike of Notre Dame, to Ross's point, and a lot of schadenfreude on their omission.
Well, I think there's a real dislike of Notre Dame, and it's maybe a generation, our generation and the generation older than us.
Yes.
That remembers Notre Dame being treated as the holy of holies in college football. It was the only one with its own TV deal. It's interesting now because like the Big Ten TV deal, I think per school generates more money than Notre Dame's NBC deal. So it's not what it used to be. When I was a kid, every Notre Dame game was on national TV, and your favorite. So I grew up a South Carolina fan. Like South Carolina might be on national TV once a year, and so it felt like Notre Dame had this exalted status and got favorable treatment from everybody. I actually don't think it's like that at all anymore, but there is so much anger on how dare you not be in a conference like the rest of us.
Right.
And like, I love the history of Notre Dame, the reasons that they're independent. Like, all right, let me give you the 1 minute version of why they're independent. So turn of the 20th century, Fielding Yost is the coach at Michigan. He loses to Notre Dame. Or, well, I don't even think he lost to Notre Dame. Michigan loses to Notre Dame, I believe, in 1909. Yost blackballs Notre Dame, says, we're never scheduling them. He goes to the rest of the members of, I think it was called the Western Conference then, this is a proto-Big Ten, and says, you're not scheduling them either. So Notre Dame cannot play its peer institutions in the Midwest. So it goes east and schedules Army, which is the national power at the time. And in you've got the underneath the blue-gray sky, the Four Horsemen Road again, where they unleashed the Ford Pass on the world 7 years after it got legalized. In the 20s, they start scheduling USC because they got to go west, they got to go east. So they play this national schedule, and this tiny Catholic school in Northwest Indiana becomes the most famous Catholic university in America because of football. It's weird because we talk about these other schools where they're like, oh, it is a college, and it was a college long before they had a football team. Well, Notre Dame became a prestigious university. Like Notre Dame's academic standing rose because more people applied, more people knew about it because of football.
Correct.
And being forced into that situation, they cherish that independence. They cherish being able to play a national schedule. I get it. I know why they want to do it.
Yeah.
But it is increasingly difficult.
Yeah, it's made harder, and it continues to, as we've discussed, make people angrier. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of 3-word text I've gotten from people. It's the same 3 words. Same 3 words you hear people talk about here with Notre Dame. Join a conference. right?
Oh,
You hear
I
it
thought
over
it
and
was-
over again from people.
I thought it was F
oh,
Notre
what?
Dame.
Yeah, what did you think I was talking about?
No,
man?
I thought a bunch of people were like F Notre Dame.
A dirty
Yeah,
three
yeah.
words. No,
I think
join
joint
a
conference is the college administrator version of F Notre Dame.
I want to
I think
point.
that's what it is.
I want to point something out. So I wrote a column for the Washington Post on Monday that I was trying to head off criticism, which fruitless endeavor, of two Group of Five teams being in this tournament and no Notre Dame. And I think for the outside world, it gets very simplistic. You can point and say, why is Tulane, why is JMU in there, and why are the Irish not?
I know why. I just look at the schedule and I'm like, well, they just
Yeah.
wasted 2 games.
I didn't want to put that at the feet of the two Group of Five teams. I tried to explain that the ACC here did not conduct its business as well as it should have. I went on that. I started the bit on Sunday night on this show. I'm not going to repeat myself, but I don't really know what it was worth. The thing that I think got buried, and people are still going to blame the G5, Notre Dame scheduled admirably for all of the constraints that we just mentioned and the fact that it's so tough to do this.
Arkansas happened to suck this year. When they scheduled that game, I'm sure Arkansas was competitive.
So many teams absolutely sucked this year. Syracuse, bad. Like legitimately collapsed compared to last year, right? Boston College
was awful. Yeah.
2-win season. Stanford basically phoned the entire season in by having the interim and taking a year to find a new head coach. They won 4 games. Arkansas had one of its worst seasons in years and fired their coach after the Irish beat them. If you go through, Purdue still flatlining, right? First year under Barry Odom. There were so few chances to build a resume after those 2 losses to Miami and Texas A&M. I don't know if you ran this in a simulation 4 or 5 times. I think Notre Dame probably would have found one more resume win in there. They just had so many opponents that sandbagged this year.
Even USC.
Yeah.
If USC is a 10-win team and not a 9-win team, that's probably enough.
Correct.
If USC had beaten Oregon, it's probably enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is part of the issue of when you are independent and you are just taking 1 or 2 teams from random conferences and doing a conglomeration schedule, is that because if you play a full conference schedule, obviously you're going to have, the top of that conference, the mid of that conference, and the bottom of that conference. And Notre Dame doesn't have that, right? They're pulling all these different, in a way they have the ACC, I guess, but they're pulling all these different schools. And sometimes you can get a schedule where you've got the bottom of all these conferences you're playing instead of the mid or the top or whatever. So there's no equal schedule. It's hard to get an equal schedule, I think.
I argue the ACC doesn't hold up its end of the bargain here.
Yeah,
it's not providing enough
totally
quality
agree.
football
Which is one of the issues, right? Notre Dame's had with the league is why they want to have a stronger schedule with the league.
I can get this to one game. I can get this to one non-Notre Dame game that may have pushed the Irish in, and it's go to the Pittsburgh schedule. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
They lost in overtime to a terrible West Virginia team.
Yes.
Flip that, and it's a larger margin of victory here. Had Pitt finished the season by beating Miami, I think that would have then elevated Pitt as a quality win enough by rank.
Well, it also would have knocked Miami out.
Well, it knocked Miami out.
Yes.
Yeah, Miami would have been out.
That's one of the bigger problems.
But keep everything. Maybe if just Pitt beats West Virginia or doesn't lose by a touchdown to Louisville.
Pete Bevacqua criticized the TV show, the ranking reveal, the weekly rankings, and he's right. It's dumb and unnecessary. But the biggest problem there is the committee, when they did their first ranking, Miami had just lost those 2 games, and the committee was ranking them in a way that assumed they'd lose again.
Yes.
And
that's
never
a good
did.
way to put it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, and I'll be honest, I assumed they would lose again as well. We talked about Cristobal. We talked about the style, if you will, of that Miami team to implode and not be able to be consistent, and they pulled the nose up.
Instead, it got better in November, which was playing against type. But so the question is, here's the other question about the ACC, and this could be Notre Dame sensing an opportunity. So let's peel back the righteous indignation and let's look at reality. The reality is the ACC just got stuffed in a locker by 2 of its own teams in a lawsuit and settled with Clemson and Florida State in a way that puts an expiration date on the conference.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Notre Dame and you're hooked into them, maybe you were already looking for a reason to look elsewhere, and this gave you that reason.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. There's also no natural affinity to this. Again, talking to Irish fans or talking to ex-Irish players, there's no hook here. There's no college football mythos around playing NC State every other year.
Well, and that's the thing. If you put them with the Big Ten teams or the SEC teams, you have a better chance of having a better distribution of good teams that you'd have to play. Yeah, if you have a Big Ten deal, yes, there will be times you have to play Rutgers. There will be times you have to play Maryland.
Yes.
But you're also going to get Oregon. It solves the USC problem. You get to keep, if you make a Big Ten deal, like you would have USC and Purdue as annual opponents. Like that would be part of the deal. And then you have 3 rotating spots because USC and Purdue are traditional annual Notre Dame opponents. You have 3 rotating spots and you get Oregon, you get Michigan, you get Penn State, you get Nebraska, you get Wisconsin, you get, Iowa. Like you get games that, well, we'll see if Wisconsin comes back, but you get games that will be considered respectable. SEC, same thing. I mean, an SEC one, if it's 5 games like the ACC one, chances are you're getting 2 or 3 really good teams in that. And that would force them to play you in October and November, which would give you a chance to rebuild a resume if you have a team in flux or a team that starts slow.
The only problem with this, and I agree with what you're saying, is that you have to then break up either one of those leagues' November schedules, which everyone is very delicate about. Yeah. And so let's take it back to our backyard.
It's funny how the SEC is not delicate about putting FCS teams in the middle of November.
No, so not.
Notre Dame, yes.
You just took it.
They'd have a problem.
You just took, you're psychic, Andy. This is exactly where I was going. You are going to, if you did this with the SEC, the only way for this to work, let me give you some context real fast. So this year, the last 4 games, Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, Stanford, there's an ACC flavor in there. Now, they had an agreement with Stanford before they were part of the ACC, but I'm not going to try and distract myself here. As you go 24, 23, and 21, I'm not going to read off all the November schedules to you. There are at least and oftentimes 2 and sometimes 3 ACC schools you would have to eliminate SoCon Saturday in the SEC. And you would also have to...
The Knights conference game's doing that already.
Well, yeah, but they're still going to have those non-conference games peppered in somewhere. And a lot of, I talked to coaches who are just like, hey, we'll move our American game or our CUSA game or our MAC game to that spot anyway. A lot that
the
mentality,
SEC, but the SEC is actually cool with playing. The SEC is cool with playing week 2 conference games and has been because ESPN likes that. So they'll move around their schedule a little bit.
If you added Notre Dame, you would have to have a reckoning with what a lot of SEC coaches and ADs want, which is that a little bit of that breather game stuck somewhere in November before you go on the home stretch. Either that or we add a bye week somewhere.
I think if the future playoff has multiple AQs for a league, I think they'll be more amenable to having a Notre Dame in the middle of November. But if not,
they'd be all for that because it wouldn't hurt them.
Yeah. It would hurt them, right? It would hurt in seeding maybe, but not in getting in the playoff.
Every single thing we're talking about right now, anecdotally, in the individual topics that Ross has brought up in terms of plans or hypotheticals or Andy that we're proposing, we're not creating the Archduke Ferdinand moment where we start a war and we blow up everything. But what we're doing is we're just inching towards the Super League concept. And the way that we're doing that is a scheduling agreement that we're proposing, which they're probably going to do. They're going to have to rework their scheduling and they're going to approach the Big 2 to do it. And then the next thing is, how does this reverberate in the playoff restructuring? You know there will be a restructuring after this, right? There was a restructuring last year because, God forbid, Arizona State get a bye. This year, the Irish are out. That's what we're going to rattle our sabers about. We're just inching towards this Super League concept that we've talked about for 5 years anyway.
It's almost as if you have to wait for certain TV contracts to run out before you get it.
So close.
Maybe. But by the way, imagine if we had last year's structure by the seating structure, what the buys would look like. Tulane would get a bye. Yeah, how about that?
That'd be awesome. They could host the Sugar Bowl. Good for them. The world would continue. Bunch of dorks, not you guys, the greater audience. As I'm looking at schedules real fast, I want to be clear about something because I do sympathize with Notre Dame, only because Ross, you were on the phone breaking news, but Andy and I plugged everything into Parker Fleming's CFB graphs. Notre Dame should be in the playoff because they could beat most of the field, I believe. On November 22nd of this year, Alabama beat Eastern Illinois 56-0. You plug the Irish into that game, send them to Tuscaloosa, we would have a much more significant data point when it came to that 10 seed or
it would be very
that 9
easy
seed.
to tell whether Alabama or Notre Dame should have made the playoff.
Correct. I just want to point that out. I'm not defending SoCon Saturday as a Southerner. I think it's crap too.
Yeah. I am fascinated to see what happens as this goes forward. Because again, I think Notre Dame may have been looking for a reason to not like the ACC and to complain about its relationship with the ACC. So maybe they found their reason. When we come back, Penn State found its coach, Matt Campbell, gets introduced. Let's talk about the new head man in Happy Valley. We're back at the College Football Enquirer, and a reminder, if you'd like to see Ross's lovely hotel room in Vegas, or Godfrey's hair is it's impeccable today. Let's just be real. We're all very jealous.
I appreciate that.
Turn on your smart TV, go to the home screen, look for the Yahoo Sports Network icon, click it, and you can watch all of our shows. Also, you can watch them anytime, day or night, any device, phone, tablet, doesn't matter. YahooSports.tv is the place to go. YahooSports.tv, and you can watch everything from the Yahoo Sports Network, including the College Football Enquirer. Gentlemen, Penn State has a new coach. Remember the old Big Ten Network commercial with Joe Paterno? Come to Penn State! Matt Campbell.
Someone finally listened.
Matt Campbell has decided to come to Penn State. He was introduced on Monday alongside Pat Kraft. Gentlemen, is it bad of me that the most interesting thing out of this press conference to me was Pat Kraft acknowledging that leaked audio was actually him talking to the players? Now, those of us who talked to Pat Kraft knew that was Pat Kraft, but
yeah.
Now you have.
Was there did someone think it was an AI deepfake?
No, but it is 2025. You got to make sure.
It's true.
He has acknowledged it, and I am curious to get your opinions on this, because I think if he doesn't land Matt Campbell, that audio and what he said, which was a very raw, bare assessment of the Penn State athletic program. One of the money quotes was one of the money quotes was they always settle for second best at Penn State, essentially. And if he hadn't gotten Matt Campbell, if he just elevated Terry Smith, the interim, I think that would be weaponized against Pat Kraft right now. Now I look at it like, the Penn State fans are like, he's just voicing our concerns.
So on my other show, Phantom Island, phantomisland.show, we spent 65 minutes and it almost got into an existential debate yesterday on all of the it would take us 65 minutes, by the way, to mention every coaching candidate that had, let's call it, like I always say, like a cup of coffee with Penn State, right? There were tiers and sequences to this search. The fastest way to explain why it took so long, I think, was at one point, and I had two different people give me this number, for 11 to 12 days, Kalani Sitake was considered to be in hand. That's one of the reasons why this drew out as long as it did. And then they had to go back several steps to a group evaluation phase to then rework who they were going to land. Now, the existential question is more like, if it's weird and it's winding and you're made fun of at times and people are getting their extensions off of you, and then towards the end you got like Josh Heupel and Jeff Brom and all these people being like, oh yeah, they called me, but I'm staying here. Like if they're just getting one over on you, but you hire a very good coach and you end up with a coach that, man, does he feel like he was made in Happy Valley, made for Happy Valley, right? Is this a bad search? Now, Andy brings up the leaked audio of Kraft. It's almost its own separate topic. Now, Andy, had they ended up with some of the backup plans that were mentioned, or Smith specifically, I think it would be a 4-alarm fire right now, and we would be talking about this like we talked about Phil Fulmer's coup in 2017 to install Jeremy Pruitt. We all know how that worked out so well. Multiple national titles, of course, in Knoxville. This is a good coaching hire after an incredibly, let's call it, circuitous route. And I guess that's all that matters. If Penn State is a 10-win team next year, nobody's going to talk about Kalani Sitake or the fact that, like, on a week ago they had Jeff Monken on one line and Todd Monken on the other, and any other Monken they could find. Like it got desperate there towards the end. Okay.
There's some guy named Phil Monken. They're like, have you ever coached football before, Phil?
It's crazy to see. Did you guys see the video of Pat Kraft at the airport welcoming Matt Campbell, and all the fans that had shown up, they were chanting and they were like, rah, rah, right? They were pumping up Pat Kraft and stuff. Imagine if who was landing on that jet was, some of the other names that we heard late in that search, maybe NFL assistant names who people don't really know, and how that would have been viewed. And, the whole thing changed, right? The whole image of the entire search changed when they went back around and said, you know what, we better hire the guy that maybe we should have talked to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, and Matt Campbell is, the reason he's such a good candidate is he would take less and beat more at Iowa State, which
absolutely,
that was the thing James Franklin struggled to do at Penn State. But the thing is, at Penn State, and this is actually why they fired James Franklin when they did, they were no longer less from a talent standpoint. They were equal to the teams at the top of the Big Ten and the top of the SEC. Matt Campbell's never worked in that environment before. He's from Mount Union. He was at Toledo. He was at Iowa State. And it is a different skill set. And Matt Campbell has been very cognizant of that. And he's talked about that through the years as something that wasn't entirely sure he wanted to do. Now, we figured if a Big Ten job opened, he would find himself more open to that. And that's exactly what's happened. But that's the mystery box here, is when you put Matt Campbell in a situation where he's supposed to sign 4- and 5-star recruits, is he going to do that? Is he going to recruit at the level of Ohio State or Oregon? Because you have to have, awesome, you can develop the Breece Halls and the Will McDonalds. That's great. But you got to sign some Abdul Carters.
Yeah, and I'm curious if we're just seeing, we're now understanding there's a classification of coach in the SEC. It might be like a Dan Mullen, right? Who it just consistently does more with less, like you're talking about, Andy, and maximizes the identity of Iowa State, or in that case, Mississippi State. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't translate at the marquee position. However, what if this time we could maybe, as a college football collective, learn from our previous mistakes? And now we have GMs. Now we have NIL. Now we have entire departments that are sort of going to work in an NFL-esque fashion. I think the question here has nothing to do with the football acumen of Matt Campbell, because he is grit. He is FFC, as I have been told by many assistants and other coaches.
Culture builder, you name it.
You got it. Absolutely. And look, his intro was filled. His intro press conference was filled with the usual sort of like new head coach pablum. But you believe he believes it. But what if, guys? What if he has the foresight to delegate in the areas that he doesn't know about? And we're talking about, so specifically, I'm talking about NIL, the financial construction of a mega roster that's meant to compete for national titles, and then also that headhunting, premier 5-star recruiting, mandatory level that you have at Penn State. What if he builds a staff to address what he can't do, and then he just worries about the ball?
That would make a lot of sense. I know he's bringing over a lot of people, including his GM, right? He's bringing over his GM, correct. I think, from Iowa State. And I just, to go back, Godfrey, about this search, it really, one day, I'm sure the story will be written from beginning to end of how this search went and all the candidates involved. But I'm sure we've all heard a degree of the behind the scenes, and it was pretty fascinating. And I think you're right. You mentioned 10 to 12 days of Kalani Sitake. I was told 3 weeks, or as much as 3 weeks, that he was committed to them. And I don't know how much I'll buy 3 weeks, but it was clearly it was at least a couple weeks that they thought, right, that he was committed, and they sort of put everything else on pause, or maybe did some, phony type of interviews in the meantime. Yes. And then obviously when he sort of backed out, which did shock, I think, a lot of people who were involved in the search at Penn State, they were left with some NFL assistants. I think they interviewed. They went around to some NFL guys, and then there was a person, I think, from my understanding, I think this has been written about a little bit, that maybe gave Penn State the right avenue to communicate with Matt Campbell late in the process, which is odd, but that they they didn't have his right sort of contact information. I don't know exactly what happened there.
I've
Like I said,
heard
one
that
day,
rumor too. That's what I'm holding off on until I get a little more confirmation
I
on
agree.
that. So
yeah,
I
I
checked-
agree. It doesn't
so-
make sense.
I checked yesterday with there's a rumor going around that there was a sort of purposeful subterfuge on separating Penn State from contacting Matt Campbell. I've talked to the specific people who had those conversations, and that is not true. Now,
it's impossible to believe because if you're trying to hire the coach, you can just get the coach's phone number. And
now, here's one. This is one maybe mitigating factor. He is not repped by a major agency. Okay. And he has previously been.
That reps college football coaches.
Yeah,
correct.
He's repped by someone who has repped coaches and big time college coaches before. Yeah, Neil Corrige. Yeah.
Yes, but he had formerly had some of his interests repped by WME. He is no longer with them.
Yeah.
What we're detailing is 5 minutes of minor confusion before you get the guy's phone number. The idea that Penn State couldn't find the cell phone for the Iowa State head coach over the course of weeks. Look, this isn't the Pony Express. Okay. No,
even if you don't hire a search firm, I can't remember. They had Turnkey, I believe.
Chatlos ran the search. Chad Chatlos ran the search.
Yeah. So they had Turnkey. They got all the numbers. Don't worry. That's why that never made sense to me. So I that's what I would love to know. Like, what was the holdup? Because honestly, yes, Matt Campbell should have been your first or second or third call. And
they can't push this idea that this was our guy all along, and I don't think they're going to narratively. Yeah, because
did they in the press conference? I didn't.
No, not really. Not really. No, not really. But
that's
I mean,
good because we all know that that's not true. Right?
Well, I think I'll give Pat Kraft some credit. Maybe he wisened up after his audio got leaked, but they didn't do that thing where like this was our guy all along, and like we hear that a lot.
But what's crazy is it should have been like. Of the names I could come up with when James Franklin was fired, Matt Campbell's at the top of the tip of the
top
tongue.
Three for sure. He was the top three, I feel like.
But Andy, that's what Pat Kraft needs to reckon with. Is I know for a fact his name arrived early on their wish list in the very beginning. So let me break this down a little bit. I don't want to drag it out too long. They did the right thing at first, which they got made fun of. They took home run cuts, which I think Penn State should do in that situation. And we said the same thing about Florida. So you call Marcus Freeman, right? Mm-hmm. You call Mike Elko. Okay, you call Kurt Cignetti, and then you move on to the level of a Matt Rule, which is like a podcast unto itself about that dynamic. But I'm going to try and keep this fast.
But congratulations on the extension, Matt Rule.
It's okay. It's okay to inquire about Marcus Freeman. In fact, we encouraged it on the show. If you have an opening, go to the best first, right? If you value yourself as a top-end national title contender, start knocking on doors, man. Go ask the hot girl.
Kirby Smart and Ryan Day just in case.
Absolutely. Yeah. If nothing else, it's going to be informative, okay? That part happened, and Campbell was in that group just underneath. The question I have, and I don't know if Kraft would ever answer it, is why did you then embark on this winding path? And I get, because I've been told by a lot of people in the industry who are ball knowers, that Satake certified, dude, right? Like makes total sense. You'd fall in love with him. They loved everything about him.
I love the idea of that hire. Now the reason for the holdup, to my understanding, and I'm curious if you guys heard the same thing, was that Kalani had basically said, look, I'm not doing anything until after the Big 12 championship game officially. So you're going to have to wait for me.
There was an intense emotional crossroads that he was at that ultimately worked against Penn State, which was that I don't think Kalani Sitake really wanted to ever leave BYU. I think he was doing his due diligence because BYU had not, in his camp's opinion, come to the table with certain things. Now, ultimately, they did in a very public way, which is why you ended up with a particular brand of cookies at signing day of Virginia Tech, because this is the greatest sport in the world.
On the doorstep of the Penn State administrative building.
Yeah.
Somebody said.
I think Sitake did what he should have, which is that he went out and entertained all offers to make sure that he could then leverage that against the place he ultimately wanted to be. And does that make Penn State a loser for this? I guess. But you ultimately ended up with Matt Campbell. This is why this search in particular is so unique and fun to talk about, because this is not a catastrophic ending. This is an ending with a guy that I think collectively are like, oh yeah, I could see that guy. Like they're playoff team pretty soon,
very
right?
successful there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Provided he again acknowledges and upgrades in the areas that are not required at a place like Iowa State.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the most fascinating part, because you mentioned Dan Mullen, and somebody I think it was an athletic director I was talking to, put it very well. Or no, it was somebody who's been involved in creating GM positions and figuring out what this is going to look like personnel wise. That like Dan Mullen, great coach at Florida, bad GM at Florida.
Yeah.
And maybe that's solved by just putting someone like that with a good GM. But the other thing is there are coaches who move up a level and continue to be great GMs. Like, just stick with the Florida example. Urban Meyer goes from Bowling Green to Utah, comes to Florida. The first thing he does is start going after Percy Harvin. Like, he had no problem going from a place where he had no access to those guys. He gets a place where he has access to them, and all of a sudden he's getting them. Like, it's
I'm curious though if that there's something about, and we have the benefit of hindsight, Andy. It felt like Urban Meyer always wanted to be in the premier spot on the biggest stage.
Well, he'd also been in that world as he was Notre Dame's ace recruiter at one point. So
right.
he understood the world. And Matt Campbell's never been in that world. The schools he's been at it's always been a situation where you got to add a value. So what you don't want if you're Penn State is a Brian Harsin problem where
Correct.
Brian Harsin comes to Auburn. He's a great evaluator, great developer, great game day coach. But at Auburn, you have to try to beat Alabama and Georgia for players. If you can't do that, you won't succeed.
I think the risk you run in an otherwise good hire in Happy Valley is that this man might be too salt of the earth to let anything grow.
Wow.
It's almost like I do this for a living. Thank you. Thank you. I knew you were going to give me a little bit of ish for that. I knew that as soon as I came up with that, I was like, he's going to make fun of me for that.
That's a good line. No, I'm jealous mostly. I'm just jealous.
That's how you write a footer for a column, folks, and then you just fill in the rest.
I cannot wait to see what happens because I think Matt Campbell's an unbelievable football coach. I like guys who make more out of less. I think they tend to succeed more than they tend to fail when they move up a level. So give me the guy who makes chicken salad out of chicken something else, and I'll take my chances there. Speaking of taking your chances, Ross Dellenger has a very interesting story that just dropped on Yahoo about a school taking a private equity deal for its athletic department. We've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. Nobody's done it. Somebody's going to do it. We'll talk to Ross about it when we come back. We are back at the College Football Enquirer. Ross Dellenger, you just dropped a story as we're recording this, which I am constantly amazed by your ability to multitask. But this one's really interesting. The University of Utah has accepted a PE deal for its athletic department, and I'm going to let you fill us in on the exact details of that because I am fascinated and I have many, many questions.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. So, basically, they partnered with a private equity firm called Otro Capital. That's out of New York, and actually, the Otro Capital executives is kind of like a spinoff from Redbird Capital, and so a lot of the Otro Capital executives worked at Redbird before that, and before that, they were sports executives. A lot of them work at the Cleveland Browns, the Dallas Cowboys, so they have a sports background. So anyway, Utah has been in the negotiations for probably a year or more with Otro Capital on doing a deal where they basically break out their athletic department and make it a private for-profit entity outside of the umbrella of the university. And we've seen this happen at a few schools. Like Kentucky recently did it. Michigan State has kind of done it a little bit. But they are partnering with an equity firm and basically purchasing, creating, and buying that new entity. So the University of Utah and Otro Capital will share ownership of this entity. I don't know about the stakes, but they're probably 55% university, 45% Otro or something like that. They're split pretty evenly. And they basically share ownership of this new athletic department that's outside of the university. Basically everything that's in the current athletic department, ticket sales, the sports teams themselves, all these things move over under this new athletic department called Utah Brands and Entertainment, LLC. And obviously the revenues will be split, right? It's a shared ownership of the entity. So the revenues will be split between Otro Capital and the University of Utah. That's where Otro, you would think, will get its principal investment back. So it's principal. I don't know the exact number of the cash infusion, but it's probably well over $100 million. And then another interesting wrinkle of this is that a really small group of like prominent donors are having the ability to buy a stake in the new entity, in the new athletic department. It's kind of like the Green Bay Packers do.
It's sort of the thing boosters were doing all along, except now you're memorializing.
Manifest destiny.
Now you get a piece of it, kind of like the Green Bay Packers do, right, with their concept where fans can own sort of a tiny little piece of the team.
This probably isn't a tiny little piece, depending on the amount of money you're willing to spend.
No, it's not a tiny piece. So the Green Bay Packers, the way they do it's called a public offering. So anybody can just buy a tiny piece. This is a private offering for some of the biggest probably donors that Utah have that are spending millions and millions of dollars on buying a piece of this. So you're
basically buying a board seat, right?
Not necessarily. The board will be made up of Otro executives, Mark Harlan, the athletic director, and some of the trustees. I'd be surprised, Andy, if there wasn't a few of those big donors and boosters that are on there. People probably listening are wondering, like, why would they do something like this? Well, obviously, they want the cash infusion to help out in finding the financial issues that everyone's having. 2, Otro Capital executives will come in and they'll create this new business and they'll be charged with generating revenue in ways that maybe haven't been used to. And number 3, it gives them flexibility, I guess, because they're not under a public university and not under the red tape. I don't have to deal with the hurdles of a public university. So
even though it actually is part of a public university, that's the thing that I've always wondered about with the public schools. The private schools obviously it wouldn't be an issue, but this is a piece of a public school that you are selling to a private entity.
Yeah.
And if I'm the lawmakers in the state of Utah, I probably have a couple questions about that.
They have been, so from the governor down, this has been disseminated over the last few months to people in Utah and to obviously board and donors and elected officials. It's been a lot of work on getting it across the finish line. It's the first one, right, that we've seen get across the finish line. A lot of individual schools have gotten close. A lot of conferences obviously have gotten very close. But now we've seen this sort of finally cross the goal line. And guess what that means? We're going to have a lot more across the goal line.
Well, there are lots of questions. You mentioned we don't have exact numbers on a lot of these things. What is the cash infusion? What is the percentage stake that Otro owns? Because I think that's a huge. Yeah. Is it a controlling stake? Is it close enough to a control?
Well, it depends on what you mean. And this should be noted because it is important. Obviously, all decisions still rest with the athletic director in this board that the athletic director chairs. So like coaches' decisions, and this was something that Utah had to run by even the NCAA, because under the NCAA structure, the athletic director and the university president is under the NCAA governance structure, and they have to remain that way for them to be under the NCAA. So still, the decision-making authority and the majority stake is with the university.
Gotcha. The question is, how close are they to a majority? How many board members do you have to flip to have a majority? These are all questions. And also, the one I thought was the most interesting piece of the Big Ten one that was ultimately scuttled was, at what point is Otro allowed to sell its stake? Because that is another risk you take when you make these deals, is you know who you're going to business with at first, but they can later sell that to somebody that you don't know. And a lot of times you can build in that you have to approve it and put some layers in there of protection for yourself. But that's the other piece of this is if Otro feels like they're not getting enough out of it, when can they or would they try to flip it?
Yeah, there is like an exit. There's an exit strategy or whatever. I don't know what it'll exactly be. It was said to me that it's around 5 to 7 years that they will have some kind of exit, and they can buy back, right? So university can buy its share back. Obviously, that'd be a lot of money. Can imagine they would do that, but if they need to do that, they could do that.
This is the illusion of control, right? This isn't actually like there are things in here that are non-negotiable from a PE standpoint. And the chilling thing that I heard in that summary was finding new ways to maximize revenue. Because if you followed PE in other industries, those are things that you might guard against or advise against in another scenario.
Did you guys read the Panera Bread story a few weeks ago?
Correct. I was actually thinking about the restaurant industry specifically, Andy.
What?
Go ahead, do that.
Panera Bread is pulling back because they did get sold to a private equity firm, and the ingenious idea that this firm had was let us make the portion smaller and the prices higher.
Yep.
And we'll make more money. Also, fewer ingredients so that we need fewer employees making the dishes. Yep. So that'll cut payroll. It turns out when the food starts to suck really bad, people won't pay for it. And so they lost a fortune. And now they're like, yeah, maybe we should actually just try to make better food and have employees that can help people when they're in the restaurant. And maybe we'll make money that way.
If there's a restaurant that you liked in America that is no longer good, there's a 90% chance PE is the reason.
Or a newspaper.
Yeah. And like, guys, we're veterans of this war, so good luck. I know Utah sees that big flash in Ross's headline, potentially $500 million. I'm fascinated to see how they make that back and how they turn this.
How soon do you buy a Texas Tech roster? That's what I'm asking if I'm a Utah fan, because that's the only thing I want. And I'm not. You think I'm joking? I'm not. Like,
no.
If you don't have a Texas Tech roster by next year, why'd you even do this?
Well, you now owe money. Like you got to make this back. What is the revenue stream that they are going to tap, and how are they going to make this profitable for themselves? All this conversation, all this time, Ross, I don't know if anyone has ever said in your stories or anywhere else where I thought, oh, okay, this makes sense from a PE standpoint. And when it doesn't from a PE standpoint, they chop it down, they gut it, and they sell it for pieces. Is that what we're going to do to Utah football if it doesn't have an ROI soon?
Which, by the way, is somewhat of a public trust. We're going to have to see what happens with this because we're going to need to get more details. And hey, transfer portal's opening soon. We'll see if the Utes are big spenders because apparently they just got a bunch of cash. And really, I don't know how else to say it. That's what fans are worried about. They don't care about the behind the scenes, backstage machinations of this.
Correct.
Will it give them a better football team? And the answer to that is we don't know yet. We will see. You will see us again on Thursday. I believe Steven Godfrey. I don't know if he's going to save the bowl system, fix the bowl system. What are we doing with it?
Andy, you gave me some serious homework. I have to blow up the entire bowl system and fix it. So I've got my work cut out for me.
I need spreadsheets. I need charts.
I want like a carrot top, like some sort of something wacky. Remember Gallagher? We could hit a watermelon.
I have a sledgehammer in my garage.
Yeah.
We can make it happen.
Let's go. Of course you do. You're in Florida.
Florida man. I have all manner of implements. Go. We will talk to you on Thursday. Godfrey's going to fix the bowl system. It's going to be amazing.